So I want to welcome everybody today to our panel discussion on the impact of COVID-19 on the livestock and dairy industries. We'll discuss both the short-term and long-term ramifications of this pandemic. I appreciate all the panel members spending time with me today. In this discussion, you will hear how this pandemic has affected the people working on the front lines to provide the abundant food supply for our country, and how it's affecting the entire food supply chain. So first off, I'll introduce myself. I'm Heather Kofelt, owner of Prior to the Plate Agri-Tours. We provide people the opportunity to visit farms and connect with farmers. And given the current situation with COVID-19, that is no longer possible, and all of our tours for spring, summer, and fall, unfortunately, have been canceled. So this is my opportunity to still bring the producer voice to people so they can understand what's really going on the front lines. We'll have our panel introduce themselves. And Jody, do you want to start?
I can sure do that. Thanks, Heather. Thanks so much for the opportunity to participate today. I think you're spot on that it's a very, very important topic, and continues to get more interesting as with each passing day. So as Heather said, my name is Jody Holla. I am the Director of Public Affairs for Christensen Farms. I've been with the company for over 20 years in a variety of roles, including Director of Animal Wellbeing, which would be my role immediately preceding this. I'm also President of the Minnesota Pork Board, and so represent our pork industry for Minnesota. But Christensen Farms is a family-owned pork producer. We've got operations in Minnesota, Nebraska, Iowa, South Dakota, and Illinois. We have roughly 1,000 employees, as well as about 1,500 contract partners that basically we rent their barns. They care for the pigs, and we provide all of the feed and supplies and technical support for them. And truckers and feed mill drivers and the abundant resources that it all takes to manage it and run a farm. We have an integrated platform, and what that means is that we've got ownership of all the way. For us, it starts with our genetics into our feed mills, and then all the way through raising the animals, as well then into processing, and further, so primary processing of fresh product, and then further processing of into products like bacon and ham. So we are partners with several other pork producers, with the plant in St. Joseph, Missouri called Triumph Foods as well. And then beyond that, Triumph Foods is partners with Seaboard Triumph Foods. And that system then is has ownership of Daly's Premium Meats, and that would be the secondary processing. Labels that you'll find in the grocery store would be Prairie Fresh for the fresh product. So your chops, your ribs, your loins, and then for the Daly's product, that would just be packaged as you would see it. And it's just I may be biased, but it is the best bacon that you can find. So most of our product is sold into Seaboard, STF, and Triumph Foods, but we do sell pork to other processors as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Jody. Natasha, do you want to start and introduce yourself? Thank you.
Sure. My name is Natasha Mortensen, and I have a few different hats. I am a beef producer with my husband, and we raise crops as well. And our lives intersect a little bit with my day job. We're also owners, and I'm an employee with Riverview LLP. We are very dairy and beef focused. So we're milking cows. All of our milk goes to make cheese at some different processing plants. So our cheese goes into food service, and the cheese would also go into grocery stores. And then I also, my husband grows alfalfa and corn for some of the dairies. So they kind of intersect there a little bit. But my two children, Grace and Cohen, and my husband and I also have a cow-calf herd for beef, and then we raise some market cattle as well. And it's pretty fun to have all the different hats. And I'm also a beekeeper, which I also love to throw in. And I just love that. I think it's so much fun. So involved in all sorts of different areas of food production for sure. My passion really is teaching others about agriculture. I served as an agriculture teacher for 14 years prior to working with Riverview. So really passionate about helping people understand agriculture and know where their food comes from. So I'm super excited to be here today and appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you, Natasha. And she does an excellent job on Facebook Live education segments.
Thank you.
Twice a week, weekly on Riverview's website. You can find them right on and on Facebook.
Yep, they're on our website. Yep.
They are excellent. My 7-year-old son even enjoys them. So
good.
Thank you.
Awesome. Good.
Yes.
We make them for kids, but adults love them.
I learned so much from them. I think they're great. Yes.
Good. Awesome. Glad you're watching.
Yeah. All right, John, would you like to introduce yourself?
Certainly, yeah, and I would echo what Jody and Natasha said, that this isn't the topic we'd probably choose to be talking about, but I really appreciate the chance to be on and opportunity to share what we've been up to over the past few weeks. So my name is John Peterson, and I'm the third generation of my family to live and grow turkeys on our family farm in Cannon Falls. We call ourselves Ferndale Market because my grandparents who started the farm were Fern and Dale Peterson. So they got us started in 1939. And I returned to the farm 12 years ago now in 2008 to begin direct marketing the turkey that we grow here on our farm. And I had a nice advantage in doing so, in that my family had continued to grow our turkeys outdoors throughout all of that time. So our Ferndale Market direct marketing program is really built upon our free range and our raised without antibiotics label claims. On our home farm here, we grow about 150,000 turkeys in a year, a mix of hens and toms. And then we also have a mix of partner farms, a great network that we work with to meet our ongoing customer demand. And our turkey products are found across the upper Midwest in retail and food service channels. And then we also have an on-farm market. So we've really felt the effects of COVID like everybody else here on the panel in a lot of different ways, but being so close to the market, both with on-farm retail and direct marketing our products, the impact was just so immediate when it hit. The other thing I should mention in my introduction, I'm still getting used to saying this, but I was just elected as the chair for the Minnesota Turkey Research and Promotion Council. So another hat that I'm just putting on, but should mention that in my intro as well.
Yes. No, great. Thank you very much. We have a nice diversified panel. I think you can all bring different perspectives, and I appreciate that. So I think I'm just going to jump right into the questions here. The first one is, how has COVID-19 affected your business? And we're going to break it down into 6 or 7 different segments because it's a lot to digest. Obviously, it's affected many, many, many different areas of our business. So the first one, I think we will start discussing about the impact on your employees, yourselves and your employees and the organizations that you represent. So again, Jody, I think I'll start with you.
Let's keep the trend going.
Yeah.
So as you can see, I'm not in a typical office setting. On the business services side of Christensen Farms, we are working from home and have been since about the middle of March. But as I'm sure Natasha and John will all also share, that farming is not a job that can be done from a desk or over the internet. And so really it does require people to be hands-on in the barns with the animals, in the feed mills, making the feed, delivering it, washing the trailers that are moving the pigs around. So it's very, very hands-on. And I have to say, I mean, we certainly expected some disruptions on the employee side, but our team has just been absolutely incredible, continuing to show up, as well as our contract partners, making sure that those animals are cared for every single day. It's just been, our entire team is just so humbled and grateful for that. We are all on this call essential employees as part of continuing to provide food, and I would say our group takes that responsibility very seriously. That said, because we are having to be together on farms, we have staggered start times and end times, break times. We have added PP, or I guess face coverings we've made them available to all of our employees. So we do have PPE on farm normally, with dust masks for certain jobs, as well as gloves for covering. Safety glasses are required at all times in the farms anyway. So additional things would be the face coverings, and then the social distancing and spreading out as much as we possibly can within the farms. On the front end of all of this, you certainly don't want to, and sometimes people have to choose, am I going to come to work even if I'm not feeling well because I need the paycheck or I don't have any time off in my bank? And Christensen Farms just wanted to take that off the table right at the beginning and said, you know what? Here's 80 hours. It's for you to use. It will not be, if you have your vacation built up, that's going to be there for you. But this really is for you to make sure that you have what you need financially, and feel like you can take time off of work to care for yourself, to care for your family if you have impact by COVID, or if you can't find childcare. I think on the beginning of this, working through, particularly in Minnesota, with the tier 1 and tier 2, and making sure that we had access to childcare, like healthcare and the other emergency responders had. So making sure that we were taking care of our employees that way. But as I mentioned, our main office has been closed, other than a few people making sure that our IT is up and running and that we are continuing to get the mail and pay the bills. But we're really, really grateful that on the live operation side of things, people have been continuing to just remain committed, and so far so good.
Great. You mentioned PPE, which we're all becoming very familiar with. That's all we hear about is PPE. But can you discuss why you use PPE prior to this from a biosecurity standpoint, why that's important?
That is a great question. So the PPE PPE stands for personal protective equipment. And in farming, there's a lot of jobs that can have hazards that we don't have when we're not working with animals or we're not working in an agricultural setting. So things like when we're cleaning the barns and using power washers, we want to make sure that we're protecting the employees' eyes from any debris that would get in there. From the gloves, there's some of the jobs, when you're handling the baby piglets, you just want to make sure that you are changing your gloves in between each of those, and you're not contaminating or bringing different, disease or bacteria from one pig to another. So making sure that we're practicing those things in our farm, and again, those are very routine. The dust masks, again, would be for those jobs that are sometimes dusty. If you're cleaning out a barn, you're power washing, or sometimes people have more sensitive asthma or whatever, so they're there as an option. But there are certain jobs that are just a little dirtier in the barn that you want to make sure that people's lungs are protected.
Excellent. Thank you. Natasha, you talk about the impact on your employees at Riverview and yourself on your own farm.
Sure. On our personal farm, not a lot has changed because we're just our family. So, the kids are home a lot more now that they're online learning. So actually we've gotten a lot more accomplished than we would normally. And the weather has been really awesome. So we don't have a muddy lot, and it's kind of great. So there's some really positives in the world when it comes to weather anyways.
There you go.
But other than that, it's honestly not that much different on our home farm. At the dairy farm, we've had to, and on the feedlots, it's really important. I think that everyone knows when you have a farm, you have to still do everything. Nothing can stop because of this. So our big focus is trying to provide the best employee atmosphere that allows everyone to stay healthy. So a few things that we're doing, it's going to be really similar to everybody probably, but masks, really encouraging people to wear masks, even when they see other people not doing that, because that's our big conversation right now is you're going to see other people not doing it when you go to the gas station, but you should do it, right? And trying to just be leaders and making sure we're doing those things as well. But all the lunchrooms, we took all the group tables out and put individual tables in, all 6 feet apart. It's just creating all the social distancing. We basically tell everyone you should have a cow between you and the next person at all times. adult cow is about 6 feet. So, and, just really encouraging, everybody to really change up how they're doing things so that we can just keep distance between people. If people do not feel well, they stay home, and that is understood by everybody. And there are absolutely no consequences for doing so. Like everything is going to be fine. We're going to make sure everyone's taken care of. If you don't feel good, you don't need to come. As far as we do hire and utilize immigration because we can't find enough local people to cover a lot of the jobs that we have on the farm. And with that, the changes in that, we quarantine, and we tell people, if you were traveling, you have to quarantine, and they have 14 days where they're not able to work, but they're being paid for that time. So just trying to really encourage people to stay healthy. As everyone here will say, if one person gets it and it just travels, we have to have a workforce, because cows need to be milked twice a day. They need to be fed twice a day. We can't just stop what we're doing. So I would say those are the big things on our end, is just really providing an atmosphere where all of this is possible, and not having in-person meetings, I think Zoom is, whoever had stock in Zoom, smart, right?
Right.
I would have saw that coming.
That was me.
Crazy. So I think that it's just, you do what you have to do to keep everyone healthy, because we cannot have a farm without human capital. Humans run the farm. Animals can't take care of themselves, even though I know some people would like to believe they really can. The farm animals need humans to help them. So we're just trying to all stay healthy.
I have a follow-up question, Natasha. So have you seen any disruptions in the immigration needs that are there for Riverview?
Well, actually, the immigration, as far as seasonal immigrants, which only helps us in certain areas of farming. If you look at seasonal immigrants, they have to do seasonal work. So a lot of us sitting here today, we don't have a lot of things that are technically seasonal. However, farm work and things like that are seasonal. So we do have access to immigration that is seasonal workers. They're called an H-2A if you pay attention to the news. And so that has actually been expanded, and the government is really working hard, because we need this in the United States, because we can't find people that want to do that kind of work here in all the places we need it, and in the quantity. As far as the TN visa through NAFTA, that is the visa we utilize most inside the actual dairy farm, because you can't use a seasonal worker. That has some disruption. So we're just, day by day, just like everybody in the whole earth right now, I think it's day by day, you just go with it, and we got to figure it out. So
right.
there definitely is disruption, but there's also really good things happening too. So the government is well aware. Sonny Perdue is an awesome Secretary of Agriculture. I really appreciate him, and I think he really gives President Trump really good advice. So I've seen some really good things happen, and hopefully that continues.
Excellent. Thank you. How about you, John? The impact on employees at Ferndale Market?
Yeah, definitely. Certainly a lot of parallels with what both Natasha and Jody said. It is such an interesting time for all of us being essential. Everybody, virtually everybody within our organization is doing a frontline kind of a role, whether they're caring for turkeys or working in our store or doing deliveries and distribution. So I think the thing that strikes me is how much this situation has evolved since we first started talking about it with employees. I actually looked back as I was giving thought to this conversation, and it was like 6 weeks ago when we had our first discussion with staff members. Then of course at that time the message was, if you don't feel well, stay home. There won't be any pay penalty or vacation penalty. It's important that we protect everybody here. And I think initially that was somewhat of a difficult message for Midwestern work ethic, ag folks. We're used to getting up and working through it, and we had to really continue to beat that drum. The most important thing here is to protect your neighbor. So do not show up if you don't feel well. Thankfully, on the farm side, the social distancing happens pretty naturally. A lot of the work with turkeys, as might be true with beef or the dairy world or pigs. A lot of those jobs are fairly socially distanced by nature. And so that hasn't had to change all that much. In our retail store, we're requiring all of our staff to wear masks. At our warehouse, it's really had a big impact on, of course, demand patterns, which we'll talk about, but that flows through to deliveries and, where we're delivering and how we're delivering. Obviously, stores and distributors are implementing a lot of new policies in terms of how they're receiving product. So there's been a lot of change for the employees throughout our whole organization. The one thing that might be a positive to come out of this, I tend to be a glass half full. If there's a positive, I do think that nationally people are having recognition for how essential all of the employees in the the food production and food supply chain are, and I think we'd all agree that those are oftentimes the folks that are forgotten. But whether it's the frontline worker at a grocery store or the person caring for turkeys, those are extremely important jobs. And interesting that the time we find ourselves in now, those are the essential employees who may not be getting most of the recognition most of the time.
Yeah, I second that. You put it perfectly, because they are the forgotten people, and I think this is visibly showing people that they are the ones that are keeping the shelves stocked and us happy and healthy in our own homes with plentiful food, and we hope that continues. The next question in this segment of how COVID is impacting your business is the change in demand structure. This is a big topic with the closure of schools, restaurants, and hospitality industries. Let's start with John, you on this one, if you don't mind.
Yeah, for sure. I thought I would address this sort of on two levels. One, the commodity turkey side, and then also what we've seen on our micro level. So the commodity turkey world, like most of the other proteins and most of the other commodities, has really fallen apart, fallen off the shelf over these past couple of weeks, and particularly on the cuts that were really driven by food service, of course. So the extremely weak spot for turkey right now is breast meat demand. You think about a lot of turkey breast meat is consumed in deli sandwiches or at a casino buffet, those type of settings. All of those channels are gone, and so we have a very imbalanced situation. Just like in the world of pork or cattle, you don't raise an animal for one cut. You need to find a good home for all the cuts that come off that animal. And so the commodity turkey world is in a tough spot right now because of that significant reduction in food service demand. One interesting just kind of sidebar, the demand that we've seen on whole-bodied turkeys has actually stayed relatively strong. And that's true not just for us, but also nationally. It's certainly not enough to buoy the loss of food service demand, but it is interesting that typically in April, nobody's buying a whole turkey. And so I think it speaks to the way that people are eating when they're at home. And maybe able to prepare, bigger meals to spend with their family. And so it's been kind of an interesting trend to observe that the one bright spot in the turkey markets has been whole turkeys. In our own world, about 50% of our product typically goes to food service, and that's a mix of restaurants, colleges, schools. We do some corporate dining. And like I said in the intro, the impact for us was so immediate. I mean, the earth felt like it shifted so fast, where we all of a sudden had distributors canceling orders that were sitting on our dock. We have some products that we make specifically for K-12 schools that were on order and menued through the remainder of the school year that went away, and so that product goes into the freezer, and we'll wait until hopefully fall when things resume. But I don't think I can say enough how immediate and how disruptive that shift in supply was. There was a really strong surge in retail demand, but as I'm sure we'll all talk about and will be said many times, those products don't easily translate. And so we've had significant demand on some items that we can't keep up with, and then other products that are typically top movers that we're not selling a case during a typical week. So pretty startling to see the change. So
if you were to estimate your percentage overall, because you said 50% of the loss came from the hospitality food service. Overall, your business, was some products increasing and some decreasing? What do you think your percentage loss has been?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I mean, like so much of this situation has changed week to week. The first couple of weeks, to be honest, the retail demand was so strong that it accounted almost pound for pound for what we lost in food service. Now these last 2 or 3 weeks, that hasn't been the story. We'd be down 40% or so over these past couple of weeks with the loss of food service. And again, with no real end in sight on that. I mean, that looks like it's going to persist for quite some time.
Yeah, the uncertainty is certainly hard. Can't plan for that. How about you, Natasha? The impact on demand structure.
Yeah, so milk and beef has typically not been awesome for a while, years actually, especially milk. And it was just starting to rebound, and then this happened. So kind of depressing, but I mean, it's the thing about farmers, and what I tell everybody is farmers are the most optimistic people I've ever met in my whole life. And we have a lot of optimism going into this, but yeah, milk prices is down. Projections are very low for May, and for beef for a while. And the dairy industry is milk. However, the second career of a dairy cow is beef. So it is all very connected. Right now, the hardest thing is that the exports pretty much disappeared. So 16 to 17% of milk was exported, and that more or less is gone. That doesn't really exist right now. And then about a third of the market in the US goes to food service, which includes schools. So we're all gonna say that is a huge effect on our market. But if you think about how all those items were packaged for food service or schools in larger quantity, larger cuts, used for buffets, things like that, a lot of it just isn't translatable to the retail market. And that's where a lot of consumers have questions like, well, we get limited on milk. Why are people not being able to sell milk when we don't have enough milk? And that is such a good question, but a lot of it is we don't have an infrastructure in the processing of the agricultural products into food products that really exists for this, for everybody really buying retail. So a lot of the conversations I know the cattlemen's groups are having, all right, we have these tenderloins, right? Tenderloins go to food service. Well, are consumers interested in buying tenderloins? I mean, we don't know. How would we do that? And so we're actually really interested from hearing from consumers in the beef world to say, like, what are you willing to do at this point? And I think all of us will probably say that. What are you willing to do? What are you willing to cut up yourself, right? So that's one of the really big things. So grocery stores are actually up, which is great. People want their dairy products. They want their beef. Ground beef costs have gone up, if you have not noticed, retail wise. However, the ground beef that's being sold is often a grind of cuts that are usually higher quality. So that's why the price is going up. It's not necessarily because of demand, even though that's up, because I'm pretty sure the world is like casserole and hot dish based right now. Which is so cool. I'm a Minnesota girl, right? So hot dish is
hot dish, right?
The rest of the world is just casserole. So 20 to 25% of people are not eating things because they just don't have access to it. So even though grocery stores are up, about 20 to 25% of retail and grocery store buyers, they just don't have the milk or the yogurt or the cheese or whatever it may be. It's just not there. So they can't buy it, even though they would buy it. So there definitely is a lot of market disruption and definitely affecting a lot of different things. I know that a lot of people have questions on this dumping milk. And I want to just make sure everyone understands why that's happening. So I'll give you the 10,000 foot view of why that's happening. So it's not that there isn't demand, because there is. And you probably hear us say that today, there is demand. However, we have basically processors that aren't set up in the way that we are. So they're getting too much milk and they can't pay for all the milk. So they're asking for a reduced milk from the farmers. So some of the farmers are having to repurpose their milk. And for us, that means it goes into the manure basin. and then we actually use it as fertilizer. So it's not lost. It still has value. It is just going to be used for something else that's not a high value. So it's not bringing money in necessarily. However, there is a use to it. We're not just like dumping it somewhere else. I mean, it goes to be used, right? So I want to make sure everyone understands that, because that's really, really important. But dairy farmers basically have kind of a double whammy right now when it comes to price decreases, because the milk price has gone down, plus they aren't able to sell all the milk that they have. So it's just that there's a double thing happening there, which is why it's really affecting a lot of dairy farmers. And then if a dairy farmer thinks, I'm just going to sell, I'm just going to be done, I maybe I'm getting close to retirement or whatever. Well, there's not a way to sell your cows right now, really. So you can't even do that. So there's this huge question mark out there of how long this will be and all those things. So the market's not positive. However, farmers are still going to do what they got to do to take care of their animals, their people, and their land. I would say that has not changed at all. We are still doing the exact same care of everything that we always have. We just have to be able to weather the storm through the prices. As far as beef goes, like I said, it's the same thing, but once and most of us that are working in market livestock, it's like once you have fat cattle, they don't keep. They're fat. They gotta go. Like they gotta go to market. So we have to keep processing plants open, and that is starting to see some effects in processing. And I know that pigs are going to talk way more about that. But as far as the cattle side, we still have a lot of processing open. However, we have to keep all those people healthy too. So like everyone's talking about, it's a wave of all sorts of things you don't even think about when it comes to food.
Yeah, and just to put it in a human perspective, I mean, put yourself in the farmer's shoe, is that you're going to work and you're not only not getting paid, but you're losing money. And that's what's happening on a daily basis. And it's just kind of heart-wrenching to think about the impact both mentally and physically on all of this stress and this uncertainty. I just want
to really quick add on the dairy side is dairy farmers are super smart, right? I mean, and processors are really smart. Like this is not a problem that's never happened. In the spring, we usually do have more milk production because that's just what happens in the spring. And farmers have had to figure out ways of changing a herd a little bit, or doing some things like repurposing that milk for fertilizer before that. I mean, that's not new, it's just at a higher level right now.
Right. Every industry plans and projects and does models for demand shifts throughout the year, but this is just an abrupt stoppage that is, you can't plan for, you can't anticipate it. I mean, it's just something that makes ripple effects through the whole supply chain. So yeah, good job, Natasha. And Jody, how about you on the pork side?
Well, I would say not a tremendous amount to add other than what John and Natasha have already said. I would say in the pork side of things, we too are seeing it from a double whammy, as Natasha said, and the price of the animals coming down and the value of that product, as well as the inability to ship pigs in some cases. So I'll first talk about the kind of the loss in demand and the food service part of it, because about 70% of the bacon that is produced is sold into the food service industry. Whether it's bacon in breakfast, if it's on top of a burger, if it's on top of a salad. I mean, bacon has kind of become America's sweetheart of condiments. So thanks, beef, for giving us a place to put our bacon. So interestingly, before all of this, the belly, which is the part of the cutout that the bacon comes from, was the highest value cutout. And as John said, you have to have a place for all of the cutout, for all of the parts, if you're really going to be profitable and converting the resources into food and make the most out of that. And so now it's really pretty incredible that bacon has completely fallen off the radar from a value perspective, and it doesn't have a home. So like John mentioned, so there is some bacon that's going into freezer space for use when the food service industry opens back up. But I would also say that there is some product that's being rendered and repurposed into things like pet food and other industries where some of the protein can't be consumed by the human food supply chain. Agreed very, very much on translation of products from retail into the grocery, or excuse me, from the food service into the grocery section, and the size of packaging, the type of cuts, and what people are willing to prepare at home. But like Natasha said as well, we're seeing a shift in really those comfort foods. And so back to the loins, back to the basics of knowing of kind of those simple recipes that can be done at home. And I'm with you, a good old casserole is the comfort food we all need right now. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jody. On the next question I had was the impact on markets. We touched a little bit on that when we discussed the demand structure, but is there anything else you guys want to add to that? And John, specifically maybe for you, I am not well versed in the turkey industry at all, and I'm interested to know how the price of turkey is determined, because there's no futures price, correct?
There's no futures price, correct. Yeah. I mean, there are, values placed on, there's a whole body market, and then values placed on all of the cutout, like Jody mentioned. Like I mentioned, the only real bright spot has been the whole body market. I mean, most growers are either raising, whole body bird that will end up as a whole bird, typically a hen, or growing a tom that will be a meat to cut up bird. That's typically, in simplistic terms, that's the way that it works. And so the hen market has held a little bit more value, but the whole meat complex has really fallen apart, because most of that is further processing for food service markets.
Great, that helps me understand. How about you, Natasha?
Well, I would love to talk about the feed aspect, because as far as feed goes on a livestock farm, we are feeding livestock for an outcome. So we're feeding livestock on a dairy to produce more milk with higher protein, higher fat. All of our milk goes to make cheese, which for us, we haven't had any supply disruptions yet with milk as of now. However, we can feed cheaper ingredients for less of those things in our milk, and less production, which will reduce the production because people maybe don't need it all. And then it does reduce your cost to feed them. So farmers are smart. I mean, farmers will figure out a way to do what they can with the situation that we're in right now. But definitely the feed piece is so important. And my husband is a crop farmer, grew up as one, I did as well. And most of soybeans and corn that are grown in this area are feeding livestock for the most part, whether it's the product right, the crush or the meal coming out, or after oil's been removed or whatever. I mean, we're using it for livestock. And the ethanol production as well, like that byproduct is used to feed livestock. But there are ways we can work with nutritionists on all types of livestock farms to reduce our costs, to reduce maybe even some speed of growth, to try to wait out some of this. Right now, the biggest problem is, of course, things that are ready to go to market are ready to go. And that's where pigs are. I mean, that's where everybody's at. You can't go backwards. So
right.
That's definitely, but the feed is so important that those places all stay open, that we're continuing the supply of crops in for feed, because we have to continue to feed. And so that's a whole nother piece that has to keep going for us to keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
And Natasha,
go ahead.
So if I could just add that, you talk about having beef cattle that when they're ready to go, they need to go. And pork is the same way. And I think you're starting to hear some conversations around, well, why don't farmers just feed them longer, or why don't they give them away and have them harvested at a local butcher shop? So I actually bought a steer to have processed for my family, and I scheduled it, and my date that I scheduled in the beginning of March was August 18th. Mm-hmm. And so the lead time, even for these local small locations, there's just not the infrastructure to be able to handle all the volume that we have at us. The other thing that I don't think is fully understood is that when you talk about the infrastructure, the last thing anybody wants to do is see product not turned into food products for human needs, and beyond just even the food part of it, all of the co-products that come with it, from makeup and medicine and clothing, etc. But the size of those facilities and the height of the rail as they're moving the products around to be transformed into food products, physically cannot handle the size of some of these animals when they do finally get there. And that can create food safety issues as well. I mean, just the ability to get products into through the equipment that's in those plants. On top of that, some of the familiar cuts that we're used to seeing in the grocery store don't look anything like they once did, because they're a pork chop or a tenderloin would just be enormous on a pork. It would most look like a beef cut versus a pork cut. And so it's a physical limitation in the ability to move those animals through the infrastructure that we have.
My husband helps his friend Travis load pigs. They're hog farmers and their market's gone. So they're trying to figure out what are we gonna do. So they're trying to just have people buy, they're like, we'll give them to you to get processed, right? So I did the same thing today. I was on the phone this morning as I was driving around for work, calling every local small butcher shop in our area to see when can I get a pig in? When is the next time one pig can come? And I found one that we've never gone to before. That was May 18th. And that's pretty good. Cattle take a lot longer to get in just because they're big and they can only do so many of those for cooler space. But
so if that's a market, sorry.
No, good.
I was going to say, if that's a market ready pig today, that's going to be way over market ready by the time May 18th comes along.
Yeah. And the closest other one I found was that June 30th.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's what you see online. You see a lot of people saying, oh, let's buy direct from the farm. That's great, but you have to have a way for that to be processed. And there's a lot of limitation. There's not that many hometown butchers anymore that do those things. So, yeah, I feel you, girl.
We've also actually,
go ahead, Jody.
We've also been trying to get to again keep moving product and recognizing the limitations even in the food shelves with kids at home and people out of work and the demand there. So we've been trying to find a place to get some pork harvested so that we can get it into the food shelf, and it is really, really challenging to find the availability to get that done. I mean, it's just really challenging.
Yeah, and then people, well, can't they just do more in a day? No, they only have so much cooler space and freezer space. I mean, you just can't.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. If you just really start breaking it down, there's just a lot of challenges. Yeah.
One other thing I might add, I mean, obviously this is a topic that we all feel pretty passionate about, but we're talking about the animal that's ready today, but this is a problem with such a long tail. And like Natasha alluded to, without knowing, how long this period of disruption lasts, we already have the next 4 or 5 to 6 months of turkeys on the ground. We cannot change what's going to be market ready over the next 4 to 6 months. That cake is already baked, so to speak. And the tail gets much longer than that. When you look at, we're ordering our poults, our baby turkeys, over a year in advance from the hatchery, and so they have laying flocks that are laying eggs that will satisfy that poult order. So in agriculture, we don't have the luxury of being able to stop quickly. The market stopped really quickly on us, but we don't have any way to respond very, very immediately, because we have that production already out on farms and growing toward that schedule. So it's not a problem where we climb the hump very quickly. All of us are going to be faced with this for a long time to come.
Excellent. You guys touched on a lot of topics I had in the next questions, but this is perfect discussion. I love the engagement within each industry and how things are done similar but yet differently. The impact on the supply chain, we touched a little bit about it, but there's the inbound ingredient piece, and then there's the outbound animals and milk and that piece of it. So what disruptions have you seen? I know, Natasha, you mentioned ethanol. Obviously, ethanol industry has been struggling. Plants have shut down. So the DDGs, the byproducts of the ethanol processing, is the corn byproduct that gets fed to animals. that is no longer readily available because of the plant shutdown. So there's some nutrition diet changes. And can you talk about how that's all impacted your business too, and the changes that have been made?
Yeah, I mean, I can start. I think you captured a lot of it. I mean, we have corn oil in our feed. That's become a really difficult ingredient to source. One of the other pieces that we haven't touched upon is some of the ingredients that are imported. And so, you know, a lot of our vitamins that go into our turkey feed come from overseas. And those markets are really tough to access right now. Some of our other micro ingredients or nutritional supplements come from overseas. So we haven't necessarily felt the impact yet, but we know that that's coming. And the longer that this goes on, some of those things that are really staple to a turkey ration or feed program are going to be increasingly difficult to source. Like was mentioned earlier, you know, the feed mill is such a critical link for all of us that any disruption in that is something I don't even want to comprehend. It's a huge concern.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we have a lot of ingredients we can feed. You can change it up. I mean, we can do a lot of alterations, but it changes your price structure of feeding. Some things just are too far away that they don't make any sense to bring here. And the same will happen in the rest of the country. You know, as you go south and they count on the upper states here to provide with feed too. It's just a lot. It's just stopping a lot of things from happening. And yet it also limits you on what else could you use instead. When it comes to mineral, that is such a good point, because I mean, you can't get that really anywhere else. It's very hard to meet those macro and micro mineral needs of your livestock without that. So there will be a lot of challenges, and I would totally agree. At this point, we don't know, because as everyone else lives day to day, so do we, and we have to just kind of watch what's going on so we can hopefully get ready for it. But conversations are being had, ideas are being hatched. That was supposed to be a pun.
Good one.
I appreciate it.
And we just have to have lots of ideas so that when it happens, we're ready to make the changes.
And the pig side of things, we also feed the DDGs, or the dried distillers grains, and so that product is not available to us either. So transitioning to more corn. So I think that would be a bright spot for corn producers, is that you will see pork producers utilizing more corn in their diets because it isn't going into fuel production. But, you know, Natasha, you touched on slowing animals down or slowing their growth down. In pigs, we do that by feeding like high fiber diets to make them feel really full for longer, so that they eat less and it's not as nutrient dense. And so they grow slower. Again, trying to buy some time here for the disruptions in the plants to work through. So I would say that's been kind of a secondary availability issue with soybean hulls or some of the other high fiber ingredients to feed pigs in order to get that done. So relative to the minerals and the overseas items, one thing that would be unique to pork in this conversation would be if you recall, prior to COVID completely sweeping all of our lives and news and everything around us, China and the Asian countries and the European countries were really being ravaged by African swine fever. And China had half of the world's pig population, and essentially they lost half of their herd. So in effect, 25% of the world's pigs were I guess, impacted by African swine fever. In order to protect our United States swine herd, we had at Christensen Farms, and many producers across the United States had procured additional warehouse space so that we could buy additional product, bring it stateside, and leave it sit for a period of time in temperature controlled, because in Minnesota it's cold and viruses like to live in that environment, to make sure that by the time we would feed it to our pigs, that the African swine fever virus would not be viable to impact our pigs here in the United States. So that I guess is a happy bright spot that we were ahead of that one a little bit.
Great, very interesting. Nice addition. And we talked about this a little bit too when John was discussing the long tail on this, the impact. So the changes on production methods. So are you placing less animals in the barns today because of that demand shift? If you guys want to talk a little bit about that, let's start with Natasha on this one.
I would say we are not making a ton of changes right now. You know, cattle is a long-term product. So if we just, I mean, you can't really stop. Like cows are having calves all the time. So, I mean, that's already in the works, as you can imagine. And I know that all of us are in that same boat. You plan 16 months ahead for a beef animal to be ready, you know, so you can't just stop everything right now and then we'll have a supply issue in 16 months.
Right,
so,
right.
Yeah, that beef is a long-term commodity. I mean, it takes a long time to get it to market. Milk, right now, I mean, we're just operating, cheese is a great product to be in because it's storable for long periods of time, especially cheddar. And there's a lot that people I think people are still buying cheese because they're making casseroles. I mean, what is a casserole without cheese? I don't know.
Hot dishes, Natasha, hot dishes.
I know. I'm just kidding. I'm not sure if I'm watching. So I'll use hot dish. I'll be the Minnesota.
Just kidding.
Cheese is like American favorite. And so when I was talking to Lucas Solstrom with Minnesota Milk, he said that sale of frozen pizza when like this hit and everyone was like, you're staying at home, it went up like 150%. And that is a lot of cheese, as you can imagine. So there's just been a lot of different, like interesting things that happen that do increase some things. But then, you know, there's only so much pizza that can be made in the world. It's like toilet paper. It's only so much toilet paper and how fast that rolls too. So yeah, I think, no, we're not making a lot of changes because you can't make a lot of changes. And I think a lot of us will be in the same boat on this panel, but for us, it's a long-term thing. I mean, dairy is the same. It's 2 years until they're a milk cow. So you can't just be done and wait for this to be over.
Great. Jody, do you have anything to add? Are you changing any production methods at Christensen Farms?
So, not because we want to.
Right.
So again, I'll go back to the packing plant disruptions and what's happening there, and slowing pigs down. So dietary changes would be absolutely one. Evaluating how many pigs we call stocking density and how many pigs we put in each barn. You can't go back and put pigs that have been growing together with other pigs after they've been in the same space for a period of time. Otherwise, it's like taking a couple of different rival schools and putting them together and watching the rivalry really take a physical form. So there is a lot of fighting and a lot of aggression that happens if you mix them after they have their pecking order established within the herd. And so as we're placing animals, we're starting to look at where can we and where is it appropriate to put more animals together in a pen, again, just to give us as much time as we possibly can to allow the disruptions to work through on the processing side of things. Again, on the timeline, as I mentioned in the beginning, our genetic program is 5 years in the making. And so when you talk about planning out that far, and the piglets that will be born, I mean, when sows are bred, the moms are pregnant for 4 months and they grow for 6 months. So we've got a 10-month pipeline. And so those decisions that were made 4 months ago or 10 months ago are what we're dealing with today. And again, if you think about how fast this has come upon us, I mean, we're just a little over a month into this, and certainly couldn't fathom that this would change our lives the way that it has. So yeah, I agree with Natasha and John that there's a big tail, and you can't really make changes too significantly. I was talking to a pork producer from Iowa, and they said, you know, geez, I feel like I'm burning up my clutch. I'm changing gears so much all the time. And I said, I kind of feel like I'm dropping my transmission because, you know, prior to this, there was all this optimism for this global protein deficit that was out there, and there was so much excitement of what that could mean for the United States agriculture. And now to have this, like, the dam has broken and we've got no way to transition it from prior to the plate to the plate, literally, and we're having to throw it in reverse. So that's my best equation, is going from 100 miles an hour and throwing it in reverse and leaving your transmission on the road.
That is a perfect analogy, unfortunately. John, do you have anything to add to the production methods changes?
Just a couple things. I mean, I agree with everything that's been said, and I think, we aren't making any immediate changes, in large part because we feel stuck between the same two walls that we've kind of alluded to earlier. One is not knowing what the future is going to look like 5 or 6 months from now, and any decision we make today will take 5 or 6 months to have any impact. But also, like I mentioned, our poults, where it all begins, have been ordered for a long time, and so it's really hard for us to disrupt what's going to start out on the farm. The big thing for us right now that might be interesting for consumers to know, I guess the thing that we most wish we had a crystal ball for right now, is Thanksgiving. So in the world of turkey, and in our world, the year begins and ends with Thanksgiving. And the poults, the flocks that we start over the next month or two, are Thanksgiving birds. And we of course have the challenge in knowing what will Thanksgiving demand patterns look like, but we place flocks to achieve specific sizing. And this is something that's unique to turkeys. I don't think it's, I don't know, there's anything that's quite comparable in the world of pork or beef, where people don't go out and buy any old Thanksgiving turkey. They typically know they want a 14.5-pound turkey because that's what grandma's recipe calls for, or a 26-pound turkey. That takes us a number of flocks that get started over a long period of time, all to be processed in that very short window right before Thanksgiving. And so that process is beginning now, with really very little clarity on what the demand side is going to look like at Thanksgiving. I don't have any market analysis to say that people are probably going to be buying smaller turkeys at Thanksgiving. I would imagine that we might be in a period of smaller gatherings, but it's, again, really hard to make that adjustment in April, when it won't have any impact until November. So it's a long way of saying we're not making changes, but we sure wish we knew if there were changes that we should be making right now to impact 6 months down the road.
Right. That is a good way to put it. We sure wish we knew, but we don't. It's the world we live in, right? In so many different regards.
Heather, can I maybe?
Oh, go ahead.
So I do want to talk about the depopulating or having to sacrifice pigs at some point, like Natasha addressed the dumping milk. Is that appropriate to do here, or would you prefer that I do that elsewhere?
No, I think this is appropriate because it fits right on with the impact of long-term supply. And yep, go ahead.
Okay. So there's more news coverage, I would say, of packing plants closing as we sit today. And please give me some grace on these numbers because, as you know, they change within minutes. But right now, the United States pork industry is down about 20% in the spaces that it has available to harvest the pigs and get them into the food supply. And so, as we talked earlier, it is about how to avoid those situations as much as possible. But I think there's a little bit of some chatter that's starting that's saying that pork producers are going to sacrifice their animals because they don't want to continue feeding them or because they're going to continue to take an economic loss. And that's simply not the case. I mean, again, you can't imagine, I mean, the situation that people are in of having to choose I mean, you all spoke about keeping people healthy and keeping plant workers on the front lines healthy so that, so people safety is number one, but then also keeping people fed and making sure that people have access to the food that they need, both in the groceries and the food shelves and here and around the world. And so it's not a matter of economics at that point. because even to sacrifice an animal, there's cost in doing that. That's 100% loss of everything that you have. And we're talking about the animals that you have your most money invested in, and all the feed and all the labor and all the veterinary care. It's not at all about the economics. It's physically, there is no place to go with the animals, like we talked, whether it's local or whether it is in some of the large facilities. So COVID doesn't discriminate whether it's large farmers or small farmers, organic or niche. It's just it's affecting everyone in the chain, all sectors of agriculture and all production models.
Well put. As you've heard from all of the panelists today, that the food sector is very agile and it's willing and able to evolve pretty quickly. It's done it in the past. It's harder in this situation because it was such an abrupt change, but the conversations that are taking place, and I have no doubt, I have all the faith in the system that it will continue to do so and provide the safe, healthy food supply to the American people. It's just a matter of getting through some of these hurdles to get there, and it's some of these unfortunate situations that Jody just explained that it's hard to talk about, it's hard to even think about, it's hard to even fathom, but it's reality, and I'm glad we discussed it, and I hope people can have a better understanding of these difficult decisions that are being made on a daily basis. On the consumer side of things, what are some of the things that consumers can do to support farmers or food production companies in this environment? Or what advice do you have for consumers right now? John, do you want to take that one to start?
Yeah, for sure. I'd be happy to. And I think, it may be helpful to think about this on a broader economic level, that, we're talking a lot about food, and food has been significantly impacted here, but the economic disruption impacts, everybody in any part of the economy right now. So I think one of the most important things for consumers is to really stand by and support the brands, the practices, the companies that they want to see on the other side of this. We've talked a lot about not knowing how long any of this lasts, and I don't think any of us would doubt that there are going to be some business casualties, some businesses that aren't able to weather this. And so I think that it is a good opportunity for consumers to make sure that they are supporting the things that the models that they would like to see on the other side. And whether that's ordering takeout, curbside from your favorite restaurant, or supporting your local grocery, or calling the farmer that you've bought meat or produce from in the past, that's never been more important than it is today. And we are seeing some of that in our own on-farm store, where people are coming in because I think they really want to be invested in supporting independent businesses and supporting area farmers, and that is a way that they know they can have some immediate impact on the livelihoods of not just our family, but the farms that we work with and source from in our on-farm store. So I think some of that is happening, but I hope that consumers know they do really have the ability to make an impact during this time and help support, like I say, some of those models that we want here long past COVID concerns.
Excellent. Natasha, do you want to add to that?
Yes.
Yes.
So I know that we're sitting here talking about some really, really emotional things for all of us. And as most of you can see, we're holding it together pretty well. But I want every consumer to know how much passion farmers have for their livestock, and that if we have to sacrifice animals, and that is very, very detrimental and emotional to the farmers. The costs that go in are one thing, but the love and passion that we have for what we get to do every single day, this is very difficult for us. It's very difficult for every single farmer. So my advice is, number one, please be supportive of the decisions that have to be made on the farm side.
Yeah.
we need a united front when it comes to food production, and farmers are already very upset about everything that's happening and the decisions that they're going to have to make. There's not a lot of other choices. We don't need to have consumers question that, or because we're looking at every angle. We just need the support. Number two, tell your grocery store owners or your meat departments what you're willing to do. Like, what are you willing to learn? What are you willing to buy? Because they can help their suppliers understand how we maybe can move some retail things, some things from food service, more retail. That would be probably your easiest way to let people know, or utilize social media on some of the pork producer pages and beef producers or whatever it may be. The turkey growers, just put them on there so somebody knows. And then my advice, and the most important one, is that my advice for every single consumer, because I am also a consumer, I don't grow everything I eat. I grow very little of what I eat. I go to the grocery store just like everybody else. And I just think everyone should support farmers all the time. Like, they shouldn't just support farmers now. We need to remember this, and we need to remember the times we're having of struggle and the times we're having of not having food available to us, and remember that for the long term, and make sure our children understand that too. Because we need to move forward as a country and as an agricultural industry to feed people. And I think more than ever, we all get it, including all of us on this panel. We all go to the grocery store, and right now we can't find some things either. And we don't have it in our own refrigerator or backyard in most cases to eat. So we're all in the same boat. The farmers and consumers, we're all consumers. So let's just find a way to support each other and to be have a positive outlook on food production in the U.S.
Wonderful. Jody?
That was really well stated, and I echo your comments very, very strongly about giving some grace here and having some trust in the farmers to do what is the best thing, the best of a bad situation, because there is no right answer here. I guess I would say, first of all, your food is safe. Your milk is safe, your beef is safe, your turkey, your chicken, your dairy, your pork, it's all safe. So please do not be concerned about that. Continue to put it on your plate through, and that is how you do support farmers. I agree with John's comments on how you determine your choices, and I think of what the trends were prior to us being in this situation. I mean, we had so much choice and abundance on the shelves in our grocery store, and I would say make the purchases and do what feels right for you and your family. But please know that there is a place in agriculture for all sizes of farmers, large, small, niche, conventional, organic, because the reality is that the United States and the Midwest specifically is the best place in the whole world to have agriculture as it relates to the soil that we have, the crops that we can produce, the way that we're able to change that into protein for developing countries and in the United States, and have the least amount of environmental impact in the long term. Like, we are literally the bread basket of the world. I think to Natasha's point, there are those periods of time over the agricultural history, and if you think about, there's disruptors, there's good disruptors like technology and a wealthier society with elevated expectations and the ability to respond to some of those transitions. But there's also bad disruptors like war, economic collapse. I think we think about the Depression of the 30s, the Spanish flu in the 20s, the 80s farm crisis, and those are points in time that absolutely change the face of businesses, and agriculture is not immune to that. I don't know exactly what agriculture will look like on the backside of this. But I do know that people need to eat. Agriculture will sustain, and farmers' commitments to their purpose, their teams of employees and partners, their communities, their animals, and the environment won't change. So be patient and recognize that, I mean, it sounds so cliche, but we really are all in this together, and farmers are doing the best that they can to come out the backside to be able to continue to do what we were put on this earth to do.
I really want to touch on this one because I know it's also a hot topic on the news, is what policies have been proposed or implemented to help livestock industries sustain the losses experienced or anticipated due to COVID? And do you feel that they fit the needs of the industry at this time? Anybody want to volunteer for that one?
I'll take that one right away.
Perfect. Thank you.
So there was $9.5 billion that was allocated by the USDA in the CARES Act that was passed for agriculture, and that was for all the ag commodities in there. The amount that was provided per commodity was a little bit different. Pork in particular had $1.6 billion allocated or sort of earmarked for the pork commodity. The issue really comes from the cap that's on it at $125,000 per commodity and per entity. Sadly, coming off the heels of very strong trade wars and 72% tariffs with China, the USDA also tried to provide some relief to pork producers through market facilitation program payments that tried to make up the difference between what they would have been paid if those tariffs had not been there. They had allocated $800 million to do that. The reality of what actually got to producers was right around 200 million, and was only able to get to 27% of the pigs, because most farmers now are larger than the cap that's there. For my company, for instance, that $125,000 limit is 1/3 of one day in the losses that we have. And it's just not, it is not going to help the producers that are providing food, regardless of the size. I mean, in a commodity market, it impacts us all the same way. And so I'll be really candid and say that we were really disappointed in what was in that relief, and are really hoping to see that change. I agree with Natasha's comments that Secretary Perdue is just really been a tremendous advocate for agriculture, and I'm so excited to see that the money was there. I mean, $9.5 billion is a lot of money. $1.6 billion is a lot of money. It's just we have to have the pathways to get it to the producers so that they can get to the other side of this emergency.
Natasha, do you have anything to add?
That was really well said. I agree. I think that people hear a very large amount of money, and it is. I mean, it's a large amount of money. However, that does go to a lot of places, and it isn't going to make up for really a very large percent of the producers out there producing food for what they're really going to lose. I mean, it's kind of, it's a gift for sure. It is something. So for dairy, for example, it might mean 1 milk check or maybe 2 milk checks, depending on your size and all those things, of course, right? So it's great, but it also does throw up a little bit of a concern just because we don't know how long anything's going to last, right? And I think all of us sitting here, no one knows. So we just got to go day by day and keep watching it. But yeah, I know it sounds like a lot of money, and it always does. And there's been programs to help farmers before this. Like Jody said, milk too. I mean, there's programs that have existed to help farmers, but again, they help a little, which is great. But as far as, I don't want people there thinking like this is going to be a replacement for all losses, because it certainly will not be.
Awesome. How about you, John? Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'd maybe shift away a little bit from funding. I think all of that is really well said, but the main thing that comes to mind for me for the government's role is testing. I mean, we at a processor level, that remains our biggest concern. How do we know who's healthy and who should be staying home from work each day? And I think when we try to find a path for processing plants to remain open, we need testing. And so it seems to me like priority 1, 2, and 3 are to find a solution to rapid tests in large enough numbers that we can be testing employees frequently, to know what we might have going on. And that's not only, you know, for our own livelihoods, but public health. I mean, we have no way of knowing what's going on if we don't have good testing. So that I just don't think that can be said enough. And then I also think that, you know, some of this is being done, but this paradox of long lines at food banks and farmers oftentimes faced with overproduction. I think the government has some role to play in bridging some of that, you know, purchasing excess commodities that can go to those in need. That's a role that only the government can play, but I think it was said earlier, we're not really faced with a time of scarcity, although that is the perception. We just need to get the food into the hands of folks who need it. And so again, I think there's a role to play there.
And then the last question, we're going to try to end on a positive note if we can. So even in these challenging times, I've heard amazing stories of agriculture companies helping to support communities and charities. So could you share some of the stories that you've been hearing in the industry, or even some that your own companies are doing in this environment?
I can start with one thing the dairy industry is doing for sure. The dairy industry created a kind of a last minute community impact grant through Midwest Dairy Association, which is our checkoff group. As all of us sitting here, I believe Turkey does too. You have checkoff, right? We have checkoff groups for most commodities that exist, and those groups really work on. They have a small percentage of every check that they will take from those farmers to promote the products and to give opportunities to people to learn more about those products as well. So the dairy industry offered a grant that farmers could apply for to purchase like a commercial refrigerator for their local food banks. And that's something that we applied for our local ADA, our American Dairy Association, and we're able to get one of those. So we just found that out. So we'll be able to actually put that in the food bank and allow them to have access to actually having refrigerated foods in the food bank. So that's one thing. I know that as far as giving back to the communities, we just celebrated a huge safety goal at work, and that was 1 million hours worked without any recordables, OSHA recordables. We bought everybody gift cards for local restaurants just to help try to stimulate that. So I think there's a lot of those stories out there, but that's just a couple things that we're doing.
Excellent. John, do you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we've done a lot of the things that I think most folks in the food world have done. We've made donations to food banks. We're fortunate that we're relatively close to the Twin Cities, so we've been able to be engaged with some of the food banks and services in the Twin Cities, and have certainly been able to help bridge some of that need. But I think here in our on-farm store, one of the things I'm most proud of is how quickly we got curbside pickup and local delivery up and running. And that not only really helped to serve our customers that were looking for easy access to food, but I'm really proud of the way that it also helped to support the farmers that we buy from. We're carrying a variety of local foods from about 100 other local farmers and food makers around the area. And when we stay open and can continue to serve our customers, we're providing a market for those farmers during a time where they're faced with all the same disruptions that we're talking about here today. So I think our ability to keep that market open and serve our customers and serve our farmers while keeping our staff busy. We've kept everybody at work. We haven't let anybody go. That's probably the piece of our response that I'm most proud of, is trying to take care of all the stakeholders that we work for each day.
Wonderful. Jody, do you have anything?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the absolute bright spot, and it's the thing that I guess fills me up in amidst of all the challenges that everyone is going through. So at Christensen Farms, we've donated to 17 food banks around the Midwest where we've got some operations. We're also the I guess the primary partner for the Brown County United Way Project Lunchbox. And so with COVID, that program has been extended to include, it was originally just K through 4. It's been extended up to K through 8, and the income restrictions have been lifted from that program. So we've expanded that program with the help of Brown County United Way. We've had lots of employees. We've donated over 100 masks to nursing homes and veterans in the community. So that's felt really good. So that's kind of on the food side of things. For our employees, obviously making sure that we continue to fill their buckets is so important, and to recognize how much we appreciate them and the packing people on the front lines that are all keeping this thing keeping the train on the tracks. But we got them hats and t-shirts that said "Proud to be Essential" and have our logo on them. And one of the things I'm most excited for was we just got notification today that we'll be partnering with several of the local restaurants in communities around the Midwest where we have operations. And our employees will be able to go in and pick up a curbside meal that Christensen Farms has purchased from those local businesses, again, to demonstrate our support for the community and show our appreciation for the employee. But the final thing that I kind of want to touch on is on the industry side of things. So as I mentioned, I'm on the Minnesota Pork Board, and a colleague of mine is on another Minnesota Pork Producers Association. And somewhat similar to what Natasha talked about, as board members, we were given a grant, a We Care grant, to demonstrate how the pork industry and how we really are demonstrating our ethical principles, and we are showing up and supporting our communities. And so what Adam and I were able to do were take dollars from that grant. We matched them, and Christensen Farms matched them again. And so we are able to provide support to the Southern Minnesota Crisis Nursery, which has been providing diapers and wipes and all kinds of resources for families who are home, who are maybe not able to afford those things, as well as they've stood up daycare services for essential employees. So they're really underserved and underfunded, and so we wanted to make sure they're taken care of. And then finally, we felt really passionate about getting some resources for farmer mental health. As Natasha mentioned, this is, there's just no words on how difficult and how emotionally taxing this is going to be. And having multi-generational farms that may not see the other side of this, and the shame and the guilt and the burden that they have on making sure that the livelihood that they had planned for future generations is changing right in front of their eyes. And we just want to make sure that farmers know that there's places to go, that there's resources for them, and that those resources are funded, because they are going to be needed in a big way.
Excellent. So that concludes the question round. So I want to thank you all for your efforts. I have no doubt that you're going to continue to rise to whatever challenge presents itself. Just want to thank you again for your time, and I hope everybody found this discussion to be really valuable and informative. I know I did. I learned a lot, so I appreciate all your time. We went a little bit over here, but I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. This was a bright spot in a hard time. Nice to lean on shoulders of others that are in the same spot. So much appreciated.
Right.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the opportunity, Heather.